and I will now start my presentation as it is 2 p.m. So thank you for joining me. My name's Adam Grocott. I'm the ICT champion at Granville School on a small island called Jersey. It's in the Channel Islands, in between England and France. We're actually closer to France, but we're part of the UK. And I've been in my role now for the last 3 years. I'm really trying to focus, because of the tools that we had available, trying to focus a shift in our digital learning towards making best use of the tools that we've got. And at the time, a lot of that was Microsoft OneNote. So I've been using OneNote for the last 3 years, and what I'm going to share with you today is just 10 things that you can do in OneNote. It's not maybe necessarily the 10 best things, maybe it's not the 10 golden nuggets, but it was so hard when putting this list together, like where to stop almost, because there's so much functionality that you've got within Microsoft OneNote. I describe it as the best blank canvas that you could wish to have. So using OneNote is something that I'm very, very familiar with. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start sharing my presentation, and I'm going to share, as I say, I'm going to share 10 things. I'll probably digress. You may pick up more than 10 as I'm going through certain things, but there's definitely 10 that I'm going to share with you now. And I'm going to switch to sharing my desktop to make sure that you can all see what I see. So this may seem strange because I'm doing 10 things in OneNote and I'm starting now with my PowerPoint, but that's because one of the most common things that I've had with my colleagues is that they've got a wealth of PowerPoints. You know, they've got years of PowerPoints. I've got a PowerPoint for that lesson, or I've got a PowerPoint for that topic. Okay, well, the first thing that I'm going to start with is slide number 1 here. You can print a PowerPoint slide deck straight into a OneNote page, and I'm going to show you how that's done. I'm in my PowerPoint here, and I'm going to click on File and go to Print, and the printer that I then want to select is not my HP one that's sat up in my office upstairs. It is actually OneNote. Okay, so I'm going to print that straight to OneNote for Windows 10. That's the printer that I'm going to select, and I just simply then hit print. What will then start happening down at the bottom of my screen, hopefully you start to see this now, is that OneNote will then start flashing orange. So you can see that that's flashing orange, and it's asking me where in my Q notebook I want that to go. Well, what I've done earlier is set up a page called Slides page, and it's currently the page that I'm sat on. If I didn't want it to go to that one, I could just click that it goes into the current section, but I do want it to go to that current page, and that's where I'm working. And the minute I've selected that and hit OK, it's now going to print my slides straight onto my OneNote page. It doesn't do it in presenter mode, and it does do them all as separate images, so I can click on each image. But I've then got my 10 slides now with my 10 points straight here into OneNote. And as I say, thinking about that, it was one of the common requests from my colleagues when I was working with them, is that, well, actually, I've got a PowerPoint for that. And I go, yeah, that's great, cool. Put it in OneNote. And also put it in OneNote so as the students can see it. Or put it in OneNote so as then when you're in your lesson, if you're fortunate like me and you've got a Surface device, you can then go to the digital linking tools and you can draw straight over the top of your images, because as I say, your slides now are just images straight away in your OneNote notebook page. So if you can use then your digital linking tools, then you've got your slide deck straight away there. So if you've got a PowerPoint, click print and send it to OneNote. That's one of the first ones that I want to share with you out of my 10. Number 2 then is you can insert a table into a OneNote page. You get some of the formatting options that you've got with it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to demonstrate the benefits that I have with putting in tables. So I've got my other page here. Look, see, there's my other page. And there's my table set up. And I've already started to put some other stuff in. I'll show you this from scratch though. All right, let's call this one table page. Once I've then clicked on the canvas, so I'm in the heading and I've headed my page. Once I then clicked into my canvas, I just go to insert. Up some options. I can have up to 10 columns wide and 8 rows deep. So I'm just going to go with this 2 columns in. It's not a problem. I just right click on it, go to my table tools, and as I say, I've then got some formatting options within here then for my table. And the reason that I want to start with why a table is this. When you're thinking about creating a OneNote page, I use them for my students to ascertain their instructions from for their project. You know, if we're doing project-based learning and we're doing some math learning, I want them to do some research, and I've got several things that I want them to be able to access, several bits of content, several bits of material. I will put it in a table form just because it helps compartmentalize all of their learning for them. So I insert tables into pages and partly it's for my own organization. I can then put in whatever I want, and I know that I'm going to give it its own cell or its own box within that table within my OneNote page. And as I say, I've also got a lot of functioning tools that I can do within. That's then great, because what I can do is I can then start to work within my table, and I can format my table however I want. I can put my instructions in there to my students, okay, and I can give them bits of feedback, and I can put that within the table. But putting the table in there, as I say, really helps me stay organized, really helps my students stay organized, and I can then pick and choose if I want to put like a bit of a break in between. So I'll just leave a blank row. They're trying to process, you know, and they're looking at all the information on the page. So that's another one there. Okay, putting tables into pages is point number 2. Now, point number 3 is that you can put a link in. Okay, links are wonderful. I've seen lots of stuff where people are starting to transition from text docs to hyperdocs, and people are trying to give their students more content to be able to go away and find, and they'll put all of that into a OneNote page, because maybe perhaps if in teams you're setting too many assignments, you know, make sure you go to this one, make sure you go to this one. If you create your student-led instructions in a OneNote page, then as I say, you can compartmentalize it, and that's where then you can still put your links in. I really like the idea that I want my students to navigate elsewhere, and I want them to go away and discover, and I want them to have a look at other options that they're doing whilst they're learning. But I do like the idea that all of that is found and contained in a OneNote notebook page, and that's then contained within their notebook, and it's contained perhaps within my table. So you can insert links, and part of the other reason why I like this, hopefully you're going to appreciate this here. I've got my slide deck on OneDrive online, and what I can do is another way of putting my slide deck in is I can just copy the Sharepoint link. So I've selected that, and I've used my shortcut keys to press Control-C. When I go back now, if I go back to my table page, there you go, there's my link to my documents. If I put that in, yes, that does the trick. Yes, that will bring up my nice little previewer of my PowerPoint. However, that for me is a little bit ugly. All right, so here you go. I did say there was 10 things. Yeah, you can put a link in, but also if you copy a link to your Sharepoint, then you get a little viewer there for going through your PowerPoint. I've clicked straight on the link now, so it's taking me straight back to it. Let me go back to my OneNote page a moment. All right, that link there, the point that I'm getting at here, I don't like that. I've got to be honest. I don't think my students are going to engage in that either. I'll go, oh, I'll just click on the link, and they're looking at all of that text. So I don't like that. If I go to insert and link though, and I paste my address in there, I can then give them some more user-friendly, instructional, student-guided text to display. So let's call this one my slide deck from today. Know exactly then what that is. I'm hoping you know exactly what that is, all right? And then there is my text to display. It's still come up as a link. I train my students, go, guys, it's blue and it's underlined, that's a link. All right, then you can click on it. Still has the same functionality. Will then take me straight back. You can see that my Edge browser is now flashing orange, so I've just clicked on it about 3 times accidentally, and they're all wanting to load up. So you can see that it's going to take you straight back to it. The Sharepoint link will still work, but the important thing that I want to stress is that's now within my OneNote notebook. Okay, so that's my link to my documents, and there is the link there that I've inserted straight from my OneNote notebook page. Now, there's 3 things, and you can see the nature of this presentation and how it's going to go. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, because I do just want to bounce in, see if there's anyone that's got any questions of them 3. I want to make sure that I'm going at the right pace, that everyone's got access to this, that everyone's seeing what I'm seeing. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and see, or give anyone the opportunity, if you've got any questions, throw them in the chat right now. Do you need to make sure you've shared the PowerPoint? Yes, there you go. So perfect opportunity to answer this question. Christine, the link that I created there, I've taken one step further. The link that I created from my PowerPoint is a link to view my PowerPoint only. I don't want to give all of my students access to edit my PowerPoint. So I just create the link that is a share only, that is a view only one, sorry. And that's the link that I then share. And I can do that from within PowerPoint or from within PowerPoint online. Okay, so great question, Christine, and thank you for that. If everyone's okay though, and if there's no more questions that are going to pop up right now, I'm then going to jump back into point number 4. Cool. I'll go back to sharing my desktop, and we'll go back into my OneNote notebook. This is my table page. Let's just recap where we are. I've put my slides in. I've printed my slides to it. I've got my table page. I've put my link in. Point number 4 is that I can change then some of the settings. What you may or may not have noticed, every time I'm typing in my table, okay, it's coming up in Comic Sans size 14. Now you can change all of your fonts. There's loads of fonts that you've got, and it will probably come natural to, you know, you've got a little drop down arrow there. It means that you've got options. You've got all of your fonts that you've got across Microsoft or anything, but the school that I'm at insists that it's Comic Sans and size 14. That's the font that we want to use for our students. That's their accessible font. So every time I'm typing, no matter what I'm typing, there you go, it's Comic Sans size 14. All right. Now, that, as I say, is the preference of my school. And what I can do is I can make sure that within my settings tab up here, you've probably heard Alice say this countless times. You've got 3 dots, click on them. It means there's something, right? I've got my 3 dots up there in the top right hand corner of OneNote, and I click on my settings. If I then go into my options, I can then scroll down and pick my default font. Okay, so there's my default font. It's Comic Sans, it's size 14. Personal preference, I'd rather another one. All right, anything that's not Sans, truth be told, I find my students have access to it. But as I say, the school that I work at, that's what they've picked. So Comic Sans, size 14, that's my default font. Anytime that I then type in, as opposed to me creating a new page, every time I add a page and going in and making sure that my font is, or every time OneNote opens, I pick between my font. That's what they've said that I want to stick with. So if you've got a particular font that you want to stick with at all times, you can change that in your options in the 3 dots, all right? Your option settings are up here again. I'll just show you again. 3 dots up there, click on them, go to your settings, and go to your options. Now, there's loads of other things that you can do in here. All right, you can, if you wanted to, this is where you'll find OneNote dark mode. I don't particularly like dark mode. It's not a preference of mine, all right, but that's where you'll find dark mode. You've got other ones where every time you, in fact, I'm struggling to navigate through this now because, as I say, I really don't like dark mode. And what I want to show you is where you can put your brand new pages that you put in. So that is down here. All right, I've got paste options that I can put down there, and at the top here, that's where I create my new pages. Every time I create a new page, I can put it to the top of my list, or I can put it to the bottom of my list, or I can put it below the page that I'm working on. So you'll see that here over now. I'm currently on table page because mine going below the selected page that I'm working on, but just because chances
right, Adam, you're muted. Ouch.
Sorry, guys. Alice, can you confirm that I'm back in?
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry,
not sure how you got muted, but welcome back.
Just a little temporary pause. We're all getting used to Teams. Maybe it was just something that I clicked. I think it probably was as I was dragging my box around at the bottom right-hand side of my screen. I was in my options, and I was showing you how every time I create a new page, I want it to go below the page that I'm currently on. That's probably just me and my way of working, that I've thought of something else so I want it to go in. So every time I then click add new page, there you go. There's my new untitled page, and it's come up directly below the bottom one. As I say, that's something that my school has preference to. I've set my default font, but you'll find loads more stuff there up in your options underneath your 3 dots. Okay, so that's my default font. Point number 5, I may dwell on this one for a little bit. Point number 5, you can replay inked text within a page. Now, I showed earlier the drawing tools that you've got, and you've got a whole range of pens, and you can add more pens, etc. And there's loads more other cool things that you can do within that. If I go back to my slides page up at the top here, this was where I'd got my digital inking over the top. But what about if you actually set your students something that you want them to read, and it is your own writing? Now, my students, truth be told, I can promise you I'll work on my handwriting because my students ask me to, because the amount of times that I've put instructional notes and I'm annotating something in maths that I want them to be thinking about, every time I put something on, they're like, "Sir, we can't read your handwriting," and I go, "All right, that's fine. That's not that's not a problem to me. I don't mind having that feedback from my students." But what I will start doing is I'll then start forcing them to look at my handwriting, and I'll start using my handwriting for other things. I won't dwell on this for too long. I hope after this presentation, for those of you that are new, you look into OneNote breakout certificates. We've got some great presentations coming up from Q about that. Have a look at breakout certificates. What I'll often do with mine is I will say to them, right, there's my quote. The last word is the breakout password to your next section. Okay. And that's what I'll say to them. Right. Here's what I do. I get my students to go to the view tab and to click on this magic replay button here. All right. I get them to highlight all of the text that I've put on the page. And what that will do is it will then replay all the text that I've put on and all of the inking that I've put on. So there you go. There was my quote from the beginning. And as you can see, this word courage now has been left out. As I say, that's what I use for my students. If I'm trying to get them to think of keywords, I'll set them that as their OneNote breakout password. All right. And this is a tip that I'm trying to give to everyone. Use the replay tool to get your students to investigate different things.
Adam, I don't see your screen. Is anybody else? Maybe it froze up for me again.
I've definitely got my red box around it.
I'm okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Truth be told, Alice, as long as Christine can see it, then I'm happy. I'm using my replay tool within my OneNote page here to get my students to swipe back and forth. This is a brilliant way for me to get my students to change the pace at which they learn at, all right? Particularly in maths. For too long, I've worked with mathematicians that think maths is about speed, when it's definitely not. It's definitely about analyze over memorize and all of those things that go with it, and all of, you know, that real deep learning. So I use the replay tool here plenty of times to get my students to go back, rewatch it, have a better understanding of the step-by-step instructions that have been happening. Or, as I say in this case, even just for a little cool thing of going, right, whatever the last word was, that's your password to your next section. All right. Or what's today's keyword? You know, we're talking about courage. All right. And say something like that. I'd love to be an English teacher with brilliant capabilities of writing out a sentence that, if you replayed the words and they came up in a particular different order, it then changed the whole complexity of the sentence, or even changed the order of the sentence and made a brand new sentence that made sense. I don't have that capability, to be honest, and I'm not that creative with my words. These aren't even my own words. I'll definitely send out a Jersey prize to anyone who can tell me where this famous quote is from. But use the replay tool and train your students how to do it. This is not something that I say to them, right, I'm now going to do this at the front of the class. This is a tool that I tell them about. I want to empower my students, because I don't want them to think that I'm the only person that does ink replay in my classroom. If they're doing learning outside of my classroom, which we all are at the moment, I want them to know that this tool is available for them. And the brilliant thing, as I say, is it puts about 20 of me in the classroom. It's like having a video recorder tool or something that you've embedded in a page, but directly there because it's your ink replay tool. And I'll show you a further example as to how we use this. This is look, there's plenty of ways to skin a cat. This is a simple multiplication tool. If I said to my students, and I've seen this in classrooms, look, there's an example on the board, copy it down into your books. I'm like, ugh. What I'll say to my students is, look, there's an example, go to your replay tool and go through it at your own pace to see exactly what I've done and how I've done it. All right, so they'll start with the question there, and then I'll pause it, because I'll say, right, why is he broken 29 up into 20 and 9? You know, I'm trying to get them to learn about how to manipulate number and stuff like that. So then, all right, well, now he's gone to 80 and 5, you know, look, what did he do next? He's broke it up. And then he's starting to think about how he's then doing his multiplication. And this is grid multiplication, as I say. You know, I don't want to talk into too much detail at the moment as to what we're doing maths wise, and I don't want to focus too much on the maths of this. But this is, if you are a math teacher or you've got students that learn maths, just show them this tool, all right, ink replay, as opposed to me modeling it in class and saying to my students, right, there you go, there's my example, you now copy that down. They may go, wait, what? I was lost at why he broke 29 up into 20 and 9. All right. So I give them the ink replay tool. I take them, I sit them down in front of the devices, I sit them in the computer rooms, and I say to them, look, have a look at it, replay it, go back over it as many times as you want. You are now the teacher. You've got another one of me. Look, this is one that I did earlier. You go back, you rewatch it, you watch it at your own pace. Absolutely not a problem. All right, and I say that to my students all the time. Okay. Now, with the ink replay tool, I do want to show off this one. This was one that I was particularly proud of the other day, because If you look it up, it's pinned currently to my Twitter. Look, this problem here, the head of a fish problem is so long, etc. Blah blah blah. That in itself may have tripped up some students just by pausing that. So again, I don't want to harp on about how much I love teaching maths and I love getting my students to learn maths, but literally breaking the problem down. If the students saw that, they'd go, yeah, I don't know what it was. All right. So by having the Lync replay tool, they can break it up. They can look at it however much they want, etc., etc. I just thought I'd show this one because if you then want to see that one's on Twitter at the moment. This was a problem that I saw the other day, and it just reminded me, this was a problem that I saw that someone else had posted, and I was like, how am I going to go about that? How am I going to start thinking mathematically about this problem? What am I going to break it up into? So this is how I went about doing it. And as I say, students could do it in a completely different way. They might want to do it using bar modeling or anything else like that. But what I wouldn't do is say to my students, right, there's a solution. All right, I give them the tools to say, look, use the Lync replay tool, go back into the features, have a look at something, and have a look at it yourself. All right, control the pace. You decide as and when you're ready to move on. All right. So the Lync replay tool there is one that I've spoken about a lot because I love it. As say, it really shares with them the opportunities that they've got to look at and guide and direct their own learning. Okay. So back to my slides. What comes after Lync replay? I think I know what it is. It's going back to my handwriting because my handwriting's poor. Yes. Right. My handwriting. Let's talk a little bit more about that. If I go back to my inking up at the top here, my students, as I said earlier, sometimes they say that my handwriting is not the best. And what we'll do is we'll laugh and joke about this in the classroom. I'll put it to the test. If I use my lasso select, so sorry, just to stop and dwell on that for a moment, I'm currently using Surface Pro. So with my stylus that comes with my Surface Pro, I've got my little button on the side, and that is set for me to go to lasso select. If you want to find lasso select, it's there under the draw options. Okay, lasso select allows you so I'm pressing and holding to select anything that you want on your OneNote page. All right, I'm meant to be showing you Lync to text here, but just to give you an idea, if that's actually something I've decided I want that further away on the page, well, I'll then, because I've lasso selected it all, I'm able to pick it up and drag it around as an object. So that's absolutely fine. I did say this would be probably more than 10 things in OneNote, but I've got my quote lasso selected there. I want my students I want them to improve their handwriting. I want them to develop their confidence with the handwriting. I want them to be able to know that in OneNote, they can hit Lync to text and OneNote will then turn it into a text for them. So even if they're looking at their own notes, and I'm particularly thinking of some of my younger students here where they're developing their confidence with the handwriting and they're saying, well, look, let's put it to the test. Let's see how good OneNote is. Let's see if OneNote knows what you're writing or vice versa. Let me put some text out and let you see it, and then we'll convert it and everything. It's just a great way of getting your students to engage and really putting it to the test as well. I've got some students that do some wonderful joined up handwriting. Well, what's it like in OneNote? And that's not a sort of catch you out culture, or I'm setting you up to fail as students, or saying to you, well, look, if the AI doesn't pick it up, then it's not right. It's not about that at all. It's just another way of trying to engage and enthuse my students to see, like, what does this feature do and what does it come up with? Well, as it happens there, that's come up with all of mine. I mean, truth be told, I then might say to my students, well, are there any grammatical errors in there? Well, yeah, that's a capital S, sir, so that needs to change. Not a problem. Because it's now text, I can click on it and I can format it however I want. All right? I can change it if I want to. If you don't like Comic Sans, absolutely not a problem. I'll go back and I'll now format the text to be in a different font. I'll make it bold. Because that's now converted it to text, I've then got all my tools that I can use to format that text on the page. All right. And before I go into anything else now, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing again. I'm just going to have a pause moment to see if there's any questions about any of the features that I've put. So I'll quickly dive into the chat. If you haven't got a question, sorry, make sure you throw it into the conversation now. Also, I'm just having a moment to see if you've got any questions. So would you be able to add an audio file? Yes, you can, Christine. You can add audio files. This was what I said right at the start. I had to pick 10. I had to pick 10 things that you can do in OneNote. Adding audio files is absolutely another one. So you can give them something that I've got an English teacher, Emily, she's brilliant. She was doing an audio description of an image, and then she'd got her arrows coming in, directing them to certain parts of the image. So as the students were listening to their own teacher describing it, whilst then looking at the digital linking as it was going over the top of the image. So yes, you can add an audio file. Whether or not you get the syncing right and the playing of it right, you know, that's down to your students. You have to train them how to use it. But yes, you can add audio files that will complement your digital linking. Cheryl, how do they control the pace of the presentation? If that's in reference to the PowerPoint presentation, when I embedded that one on the page, they can then just flick back and forth through the slides however they want at their own pace again from that. Okay. Right. I'll dive back into my presentation now because one of the next things that I want to show you is a super powerful tool, especially the school that I work at. We have a lot of students where English is an additional language to them. So where I teach, it's EAL, you know, that's the acronym for it. EAL students means English as an additional language. Wherever you're working, you've probably got students where the language that you speak may not be their first language. Well, look, your students can access pages and content in pages on OneNote in other languages. Okay, so I'm going to go back now to my quote. As I say, not my quote, but my favorite quote. This quote here, I would love to know what it's like in a different language. Fine. Go to view in OneNote and click translate. Now, the other way of doing it is in Immersive Reader, but in the first instance, if I just want to translate that text there, I'll select translate and I'll select the selection of text that I've got. And if anyone at this point of the presentation is fluent in a different language, I've got Danish here because we were looking up some Lego stuff the other day. But if anyone is fluent in a different language and wants to put this to the test, absolutely. There's over 100 languages in here. The most common one that we have over here in Jersey is that we have a lot of Portuguese students. So there you go. I'm always doing this and going, right, there's your instructions. Yes, I'll apologise to my students. My spell checker has come up and now everything's in red and underlined. But I'll say to them, look, I've put the instructions in Portuguese for you as well, but I've also put the English one in. Okay. So it's detected my English there. I've inserted it into a different language, straight there into the OneNote page. So as you can see for your students, and they can see that, I mean, I think it's important that they understand that you're trying, you know what I mean? I'm trying to make this accessible for my students. I want them to know that I'm doing my best for them. And what I'm just going to show here as well, every time I insert one, it comes up in a new language. So in between my best linguistic skills there, I can see that that's the end of my Portuguese and that's the start of my Russian. If I then flip it back, there you go. There's still my original quote. So it's got to be pretty accurate. And every time I'm inserting that now with my text, it's putting it in the language every time I click insert. So one that I am a little bit familiar with is a little bit of French. So again, let's insert it in French as well. All right. So all of these different languages now my students they've got access to that straight in the OneNote page because built into OneNote is the translate feature. Okay. Now you can also find that in Immersive Reader, and truth be told, I think Immersive Reader in itself is probably a webinar, but I'll quickly dive into it so as you can see it. That's brought up my text there. It's brought it up in Spanish. It's brought it up in English, French and Russian. Within the Immersive Reader, that's where you'll then be able to find your reading preferences, and it's your reading preferences that will then be able to change your language as well. So if I want to change now the whole page into German, it will pick up all of the different languages that are on the page, Portuguese, English, do the whole document. There you go. It's going to take all of those different languages and it'll turn it all into German. All right. And I've got all of them tools within there, within my Immersive Reader. I can then focus on it. Actually, that's still in French. But either way, you see the point I'm making it. There's plenty of ways of doing this. There's my original. If I come back out of this, I can then, as I say, I've gone into my Immersive Reader. That's where I'll find it. You can just do it just by the selection as well. So once I've then gone back into the Immersive Reader, it may just pick up that selection for me, or it's that I can select it here straight away within Immersive Reader. But you've got all of those tools right there under your reading preferences. That's where then you can select a different language. And this is the one that then brings me on to my next point. As you can see there, mine's bright blue. I quite like bright blue. I'm not sure if you've got your own preferential reading colours and everything else like that. But what I found a lot of my students doing when I showed them Immersive Reader is, yeah, they would tinker around with the colours to find out one that they found suitable. But I then find them going back in and out of Immersive Reader and constantly flicking in between. Well, I then said to my students, well, look, why don't you just change the page colour? You can change the page colour right here in OneNote. So as I say, the the preference color that you've got within your immersive reader, you can then just change that straight away onto your page there. You've got a lot of pastel ones by default, okay? The 16 pastel shades there that you can flick in between, that you can choose your preference color. You can find more, right? I don't know if I've not yet come across many students who've said that, you know, some of these brighter colors are actually their preference. Okay, there you go. That's that don't really work for me. But as I say, it's not about me. It's about me saying to my students, look, you go in and you spend 10 minutes if you want finding out which color will work. That time into that 10 minutes to make your page color in OneNote. Okay, so plenty of page colors that are in there, and that then stops them having to worry about, as they start to grow in confidence and they start to use the immersive reader, they can then start coming back out of it and thinking about, well, actually, I can still access my learning because I've now set up my learning page for me. And that's not something that I want to do. If I go into my class notebook tools and start distributing pages, I don't want to do that for every different color for every different student. I want to give them the tools to say, look, you can take care of this for yourself. All right, there's a tool within OneNote that you can go back to. And I just now quickly jumping into the change there. That's only that color. All right, come back to the other ones and I haven't changed the page color here, so that one's still white. Okay, that won't change as well the background of my PowerPoint. But again, it's just about saying to your students, well, look, let's give you some tools that you can do here that you can use. If I change the page color here, you'll see that it changes around the image. And I mean, that might help in itself, right? If I pinch zoom out, look, if I pinch zoom right out and see how much canvas space you have got in OneNote, it's absolutely enormous. But if I pinch zoom out, well, actually, that might make that slide stand out a bit more, especially if I've then got my page color as something really dark. All right, that's going to make my slides stand out even more. So for my instructions for my students, look, focus on the slides. There you go. There's the slides. Focus on those. All right. So that was point number 7 about translating. Point number 8 about changing your page color. Point number 9, if I set my students projects, I can get them to do their research right here within OneNote. And it's citable research, stuff that you can use, stuff that I'm saying to them, well, look, let's go away and let's find out some information. So if I go back to my table here, and I'm going to say to my students, right, in one of your cells in your table, I want you to include some research, right? How are they going to insert some research onto their page? Boom, it's right there. Researcher tool within OneNote allows them to find out other things that they want on the internet. All right, let me research my favorite topic. There you go. There's plenty of research from all different types of sources. I can filter out whether I want to find just journal articles, if I want to find it through websites, relevant topics that have come up from the news. Researcher tool straight there in OneNote. That gives my students a research tool, a search engine tool that, as I said earlier, I don't want them necessarily migrating away from different platforms. I don't want them going away and looking at different articles, but migrating away and using different platforms, I'm not necessarily a fan of. Okay, so let's do some research and get it put into my OneNote notebook here. Let's research Neville Longbottom. There you go, played by Matthew Lewis. That's not a problem. I now just click on that plus sign and that will add it to the page. And can you see straight away, this is why, again, I go back to them. I love tables so much because I was in the table that has then specifically put that research, that image, that link. All right, bit of an ugly link. I might want to change that one myself, but that text as well is then straight away into my OneNote notebook. It's straight away into my table. And with the text, then I can go away. So this has come up in this font. I'll go back. I'll find one of my favorite fonts, not a problem. Can change all that and I'll make it my own. It's citable research, but I'm now making this my own. That's my own research. For my students, that's their own research. It's stuff that they've gone away and found. It's stuff that they've got organized within their tables, and it's straight away there in OneNote. All right, so it's not something that you're constantly having to navigate away from. All right, brilliant bit of tool there. As I say, there's plenty of stuff under the insert, under the researcher, plenty of stuff that you can put in. But that's my point number 9. See, look, it's even come up with some suggestions for me. I don't know quite what the link is, all right, or if these are just popular ones. International Space Station will be popular, all right. Let's see what its acronyms are like. ISS. Yeah, there it is, International Space Station, second one down. So that wasn't too bad. All right, International Space Station. I've clicked on the researcher now, and if my network connection was a little bit better, it took me to that quicker. But there you go. There's the bit of research that I want in. I'll just make sure that in my table tool over here now, I'm in this cell, or as I say, I'll go one further down just as you can see. Let's add that in. There's the International Space Station. It flew over Jersey last night. All right, loads of people could see it from Jersey. That's my research on the International Space Station. This researcher tool, you could say, is out of this world. Please ignore my bad British puns. All right, researcher tool, you'll find it under insert, and you'll find it there, researcher, brilliant. Get your students to throw their research straight into their page. And the last one then, if you're thinking about then where you can take this for your students to say, well, look, I've allowed you to do some research, you've accessed all the resources that I've put in there, you've accessed the links, you've replayed everything that I want. Now let's do a quick knowledge quiz, all right? I love Microsoft Forms. It was one of the first badges that I did on the Microsoft Education community website, now called the Microsoft Education Center. And I know that there's some brilliant presentations coming up from the more stuff that we've got on running through Q, running throughout the whole month of June, etc. There's going to be some great stuff about Microsoft Forms. I love Microsoft Forms, and I love that I can throw them straight into a OneNote notebook page. All right, let's go back to my table page over here. And you know what? Again, I'll make more use of this never-ending canvas that I've got. I've clicked over here, so I can then start typing over here. All right, just to demonstrate that. What I'm then going to do next to researcher, that little drop-down arrow brings up my forms. All right, my forms that I've got attributed to my account will then load up there. Right, what this is asking me to do several times is it's asking me to now sign in. All right, and I'll apologise for that, but that's trying to find my forms. And because I'm working on one machine here with two different accounts, that's why this then is taking ages. But I promise you, in all of them there, that will load up your forms. And you can just click on the one that you want and insert it straight to the page. What I'll do is I'll go back to my OneDrive, to my Office account, sorry. If I go do this a quick way, I'll go to office.com and I'll find my Microsoft form because I like working on mine still from within Office. But what I can do, you know, earlier when I was on about pasting the links in, the great thing about Microsoft Forms is it doesn't just paste it as a link. It will take then the Microsoft Forms that you've got and it will embed it straight into the page, just like it did earlier with my PowerPoint presentation. So, oh look, I've got a quiz here about Neville Longbottom. Let's make sure that everyone's been paying attention. Who plays Neville Longbottom in the Harry Potter films? You know what? Here's another one, right? I know this was meant to be 10 things in OneNote, but you know when I was talking about pasting links in earlier, I've pasted my link in here into my forms quiz. Absolute brilliant gem. All right, so as my students then within forms have got some content to watch, I want them to complete this forms. So I'll copy that link there. I'll take it back to OneNote. And the minute I've then pasted it on the page, look, there was that ugly link. It's done everything for me as I wanted it to earlier. It's converted it into some nice accessible text for my students to look at. And then it's put my forms straight away there on my OneNote page, right? So I can then navigate around it. I can say to my students, look, complete the forms that goes with the research that you've been doing. All right, and there you go. There's their forms quiz. They can do it straight away here, straight away in OneNote. I can distribute that out to my students. I can share that with them so as then they've got access to the forms. I come back to the point I was trying to make earlier. I do like my students having the ability to do about 15 different things. I don't like them having to navigate away from everywhere else. All right. So I like putting everything that I want, and I can pick that up and I can move it. All right. As I say, OneNote's, I think they call it infinity canvas is the correct terminology for it. All right. But actually that one there, I'm going to drag around and I'm going to put it right next to this article here. And I don't need my stuff on my International Space Station. So I'll delete that. I'll right click and I'll go to my table tool as well here. And I'll delete that row because I don't need that one either. But look, there's my Microsoft Forms. It's about my favorite Hogwarts character. Students, have you done your research? Can you go to your forms? Can you tell me who it is that plays Neville Longbottom? Look, here's a little video as well to inspire you. All right. So that's 10 things that you can do in OneNote. All right. I'll just do the quickest 20-second recap. Point number one, print your PowerPoint slides straight into your OneNote notebook page. That's point number one. Point number two, put a table in. Insert table. Your students will love your instructions compartmentalized in a table. Put some links in. You can do that by going to insert link and make sure that the text that gets displayed is a lot more user friendly for them. If you want your text to be a bit more user friendly, bear in mind that you can change the settings of it. You can change what you want your font to be and how big or small you want it to be. If you want to do some digital linking, that's absolutely fine. Make sure that you let them know that they've got the replay tool built within OneNote and they can go back over text themselves. If you want to keep writing on them pages and your handwriting isn't the most accessible, don't panic. You can convert it to text. If they're EAL students, they can access it in other languages. They can do that in either using the Translate tool or the Immersive Reader. If they're used to looking at things in a different color background in the Immersive Reader, they can change the page color, absolutely fine. And when they're putting stuff into their own pages and making it their own, they can do that with the Researcher tool. Put some research in, give them a quiz on it, test them on something on forms. I'm going to dive out of my presentation now, and I'm going to dedicate the next 15 minutes for me staying online and answering any questions that anyone else has got. All right, I don't want to feel like I've rushed through this, or if anyone else wants to know anything, as I say, I'm going to temporarily dive out of my sharing of my desktop, and I'm going to look at the chat in Teams to see if anyone else has got any questions about that. All right, Blake, can you please tell us how you select table page, please? Okay, I'll just go back over that one then. How to insert a table. It's insert the, you know what, may as well just show you. Let me go back to demonstrating. Insert table there. You can choose how many rows and columns that you want, all right, but don't panic. I mean, the other one that you can do, and I'm going to demonstrate this now. I've put that in. It's automatically come up at that size. I can stretch it, not a problem. I've got a lot of functionality within my table here, straight away within my OneNote page. All right. So this is the table that I'm putting in now, and I can change the columns and everything to fit. It doesn't quite do everything that you can do in Excel or that you can do in Word or anything else like this, but you know, making sure that I've got my table there for my students to be able to compartmentalize my instructions. You'll find that under Insert and Table there. Okay. I'll dive back out. I'll come back to the chat. How do you add one page from OneNote, e.g. a slides page, in an MS Teams channel? Right, what you can do for that one, Ketwig, great question. If I share here, all right, what I can do is I can share that notebook, all right, straight to my Teams, all right, or I can share it to my students, so I can copy that link there. I think what you're looking to do, though, and truth be told, it's a good question because I've not tried this. My students, because I organise my class notebooks all in certain ways and certain styles, what I think you can do from OneNote here, link a SharePoint link from any of your classes here. I can't go into these because these are my own student ones, all right? But what you can do is you can generate any link from a OneNote page or anything else like that. What I like to do for my students is, if I want to direct them to a specific page within OneNote, I'll put that as part of my instructions whenever I'm setting an assignment. I still like to set my students assignments from within Teams, but the learning that they're going to demonstrate is in OneNote. So as part of my instructions, I'll say to them, in your handout section, find the page, and I'll give the name of it, and that's where they'll navigate to it. So I'm just making sure that I'm covering my bases for my students, but I would have a go at that. See if you can copy a link to a specific page from SharePoint if you open it in OneNote online. Wendy's asked, when you do this, what is your planning process when figuring out the flow and keeping students from being confused or overwhelmed? Great question. Where I teach, we have schemes of learning, and we have guidance and sort of guidelines as to how long or short that should take my students. What I love about OneNote is you can just adapt it, all right? And I'll do a lot of things for my students within OneNote. If it's not going well, I'll just review it. I'll add a new page. As I showed earlier, when I add pages into my OneNote notebooks, mine automatically go into below, because chances are I have thought of something different that I'd want to do with my students, and actually I do want to direct them and send them off elsewhere. But in terms of the planning of it, I'm starting to get into my hyperdocs. I'm never going to know all of the answers. I like to think I know most of the answers. I like to think that for my students, because I know my students and I've got that sort of human connection with them, I would like to think that I know that I'm gearing up my resources to make sure that they're all set up for it. And I'll start with my tables. I just keep one column and I get them working down in chronological order. And I'll set my work based on my schema learning for that and for my instructions. But to make sure that they're not overwhelmed is absolutely not a problem for me, because I want them to, as I showed with the Ink replay tool, I want my students to know that because we've got flexibility with how we work within OneNote, I can get them to go back and review different things. All right, it's not a case of I've set you a OneNote page, you've got to have this one done today. It's not about that. It's about saying to my students, well, look, all of your work is there in OneNote, because my flyers, they might want to go off and access all of it as soon as they can. Not a problem. They'll access it as much as they want. I'll then review their work and I'll give them some feedback based on what they've done. And it may be that actually they went too far too quick, but I've got that flexibility and I do have that in the back of my mind when I'm planning. And as I say, the best thing about OneNote is that if there's something that I've decided actually, they're going to need more information on that, I'll just insert a new page. Column within my table or something else. Students have all that flexibility within OneNote. It may be that actually, and I've had this in the past, percentage change. Great time for teaching percentage change in maths is in and around January and in and around Christmas, and you get students thinking about best buys. Well, when I'm then planning out my scheme work, it's great to say, well, look, go on this website and have a look at how much this costs. I know that we've now started to pick up on Black Friday. Absolute brilliant project for setting your students right now. Find the newest best price for this item. Go and find this TV. Go and find me an Apple Watch. Right, who's got the best deal? Because that's never changing landscape. I say to my students, right, get a new link pasted into it. All right, we want to collaborate on this together. We can do all of that within OneNote. It's a constant, ever changing cycle. And as I say, the best thing about OneNote is you've got the flexibility if you're doing that. Find that. Now, Siri's then trying to find me an Apple Watch because I said Apple Watch then. What happens if you do insert Excel? Okay. If you insert an Excel spreadsheet, there is some functionality to it. I don't have an Excel spreadsheet set up. I know when I repeat this presentation in a couple of weeks' time that I definitely are now going to have. You can share it from your Sharepoint link just in the same way as you do your PowerPoint. You will have some functionality within it. Chances are you're probably best off just inserting the link to the Excel file and then distributing that out to your class students from there. If it's one that you want them all to collaborate on, absolutely fine. If it's one that you want them to have themselves, I would assign that throughout Teams. It does pop up within OneNote in the same way as the PowerPoint presentation previewer did earlier, but getting your students to work in that, truth be told, in my experience, and I have tried it, then they're not going to benefit from that. Send them the link, get them to collaborate on the Excel spreadsheet from OneNote, but then with the link within OneNote. I think a class team already sets up a notebook for students. Is that correct? Christine, your class notebook will be set up if you create it for the first time from your Teams channel. At the start of this academic year and for the last two as well, we've only had OneNote and class notebook facilities. So when I've created class notebooks, I've gone through the whole steps on the Microsoft Office websites. If you just bear with me just for 1 second, if I just go back to office.com and I'll then dive into Teams and I'll show you now. I'll start showing my desktop again. So as you can see this, when I go to class notebook tool here, from office.com, that's what allows me to create them. This is what my staff and my colleagues have had to do at all times, and you create your class notebook from the class notebook manager tools right here from office.com. If, however, there you go, create one, add or remove students or add or remove teachers, you can manage your notebooks all from there, office.com, class notebook. If you've got a student that's joined late, not a problem. If, however, you do it from Microsoft Teams, from your Teams channels, if you've got a student team, in fact, I haven't got a student one set up in here, but you will then be able to have a class notebook from your teams that you've got set up there. All right, it's absolutely not a problem. What I would say is have a conversation with your school to say whether or not from your LMS, your learning management system, we at my school use Sims and use Capita Sims, that will migrate all of our classes from our students from our central management system that does our registers, our data on students, welfare and everything else like that. That will generate our class teams and it will map all of that out. And as I say, it will map out a class notebook in the process. However, if, as I say, you want to you want to create one for yourself at the start, you can do it from the class notebook teams. But if I were you at your school, I'd have a conversation with your data managers or your business managers to say, look, have we got an LMS here that maps straight to Teams, so then it can map all of my students out from there. Okay. Richard, my students have been using Office 365 in my classes now with my students for the last 3 years. So I've got some, as we call them, in year 10 that I started this with when they were in year 7. So fresh in from primary schools, using OneNote, from day one. They've been using it now for 3 years. It's become second nature to them. And for some of the other schools that I know who I've worked with, I've got friends that have worked at other schools, they've all, in them 3 years, done at least 2 different virtual learning platforms or different places where the students will access it. You've got other competitors out there. My students have always been under the impression my work is going to be on OneNote. It's going to be distributed to them on OneNote. And in the current lockdown situation that we're in, the transition to that, truth be told, we had more of an issue training the parents who are now at home with them and saying, look, the work is on OneNote. And they go, yeah, but I've never used OneNote in my life. And you go, well, your student has. All right, they've used OneNote. They use it every week in ICT lessons. I distribute all of my maths work for there. And particularly, I use that from a teacher's perspective as well, because with OneNote, what I wanted to make sure was the content that I'd annotated using my Surface Pro in class, my students had then got access to that content elsewhere. The content that we create as a group, I wanted to make sure that they got it and they could access it elsewhere. So yeah, they've used it for the last 3 years. They love it. They're familiar with it. And they love that, particularly with OneNote, and hopefully what I've shown some of the features of earlier, it's very similar. There's a lot of fluidity between Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, all the tools that you've got. So that's how long they've been using it for. I wouldn't say that it took them 3 years to get au fait with it. Some of our students are absolute flyers. And for Wendy, any tips to any students who haven't started it yet? Some of the best way to get your students to do it is to just have a go. I have created, it's specific to Windows 10. Wendy, if you want to follow me on Twitter at @Grocott, you can follow me on Twitter, because I have been working on recently. Do a OneNote breakout certificate for your students so as they learn about the tools of OneNote. So set them up with password protected sections to say, look, to unlock the next section, what's the first thing under the insert tab? Your students have then got to go to the insert tab. So my first tip to them would be just go on, kids, and make a mess of it. Have a go, draw all over some work. Who can snip an image in first? Set them off with challenges. With a year 8 group that I had a couple of years ago, I'd got a new challenge every 10. So every 10 minutes there was a new challenge. First one to do it in OneNote. Well, of course, as some of them were exploring, by the time I got to the 5th challenge, they were like, oh, I've already done that. Brilliant. Just let them have a go. Just let them dive in and have a go. It's the best thing about OneNote. You can't really mess it up. Even if you get a section wrong or you get a page wrong, it'll go to your deleted sections. You can recover it from there. It's absolutely not a problem. I'm going to reach out to Alice now to get her to end the recording. Thank you to everyone for joining me today. Thank you for being on board. Thank you for your questions. It's been great getting to hear from some of you. I'll end the recording now, but I will stay on until the last person's here to make sure that everyone's got